Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well, because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments, so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before I introduce today's special guest. I'm happy to announce my first book is now in print. The title is Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again, Fixing the Root Cause of Your Fatigue with Natural Treatments. I've discovered 14 root causes of fatigue. I like to call them the fatigue factors. And in this book, I explain 8 of the 14. I've had some amazing feedback on how easy it is to read and understand. It's not full of technical doctory language like most books written by doctors are. And of course, the book also includes my own personal fatigue story, along with 4 other stories from real fatigue cases from my private practice. It's available in paperback and Kindle forms, so if you'd like a copy, you can find it on Amazon or on my website, www.drcarri.com. That's it for our housekeeping, so let's get started. I'm very excited about this week's show because we will be talking about gluten and dairy and sugar and how to stop eating those. So my special guest today is Shirley Plant. This is our second interview with Shirley, and in our podcast notes, I'll make sure to link back to their first interview. But Shirley is the author of Finally, Food I Can Eat, an inspirational dietary guide and cookbook for people affected by food allergies and intolerances. She is recognized as a menu planning expert. She's given seminars on food allergies, cooking, and menu planning. As a nutritionist and dietary designer, Shirley offers her clients and their families a rare understanding and unique expertise that few people can match. Her pleasant and caring manner, her own experience as a food allergy sufferer, and her creative design flair all help offer hope for all of the people struggling to find light at the end of the dark dietary tunnel. Shirley, thank you so much again for being a guest today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
Well, thank you, Carri, for having me back.
So Shirley, today I really wanted to tackle gluten and dairy and sugar. You know, on our last interview, we only had so much time and we spoke about a lot of different things, food allergies and food sensitivities and food intolerances. But today I wanted to focus on these 3 because I think they're 3 big ones. And I think I know for me personally as a functional medicine doctor, usually when patients remove these 3 big foods, they get tremendous gains in their health. But when I recommend they remove these 3 foods from their diet, they kind of get a deer in the headlights, look in their eyes of fear and how am I going to do that? So let's first talk about gluten, because I think a lot of people might still think that it's like a fad diet that's going on right now, and do they really need to get off of gluten? So can you talk to us about that first?
Sure. So let's begin with, gluten. We hear it in the news. We see it everywhere. There's this whole billion-dollar industry now for gluten-free products. And let's just go back and, gluten is a protein that's found in certain cereal grains. So it's in barley, it's in wheat, it's in rye, it's in spelt and kamut. And the problem is these days is that our wheat has been changed so much compared to 40 years ago. And the research now is showing that our bodies have just not caught up and are unable to digest this protein in these cereal grains. And of course, we've seen the books, the Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis and the Grain Brain by Dr. Perlmutter, and they discuss more in depth what has happened to the wheat of yesteryear. It's no longer. And some researchers say that literally 1 in 3 is unable to digest gluten. And what happens is when you ingest gluten, is the body sees it as a foreign entity. And so it creates these antibodies, and that creates inflammation in the body. And so many of our chronic conditions today, be it migraines, asthma, skin issues, irritable bowel, so many of the conditions, as you know, Carri, are caused by inflammation. And gluten creates inflammation in the body. And so many of us, we don't necessarily get those signals right away because, of course, as we know, inflammation can go on inside our body for a long time before our body starts to tell us or give us the signs of whatever may be ailing us. So I created what I call the 21-day challenge, and it's enables people to remove gluten, dairy, and sugar from their diet. And it's funny, you said that when you say that to your patients, they get that deer in the headlights, like, what? I have to take gluten, dairy, and sugar out of my diet? And during the challenge, we talk about that, and I help people realize that there are so many foods you can eat. It's not something horrible to be told that either you have a gluten sensitivity or that you are celiac. Now, being gluten sensitive or having a gluten intolerance is very different from having celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the body cannot digest gluten at all. It affects the tiny little hair-like structures that line our intestines. They're called villi. And what happens is literally they get destroyed, and they're the ones that pull the nutrients from our foods. And so celiac disease is very, very serious. You can be very, very ill with celiac disease. It's difficult for people because in the news we hear that this is a fad diet, or, you'll lose weight if you go off gluten. And, you probably will lose weight if you go off gluten because so many of the prepackaged foods are not healthy for us and they contain gluten. But for those of us that have a gluten intolerance or are celiac, it's very serious. And the one thing I want to just say is if you suspect that you have celiac disease or you are celiac, you need to be tested while eating gluten. So that's important just to note there.
So Shirley, as we were talking about, most people it's really scary, the thought of going off of gluten and what am I going to eat, because everything, that's, I commonly get that, but Dr. Carri, everything has gluten in it, what am I going to eat? So, and as you said, it's like the new $1 trillion industry is gluten-free foods. So what about just having that person just go to the grocery store and they shop in that aisle that's like all the gluten-free foods? Is that all they need to do? And is that even healthy?
Exactly. And that's, good point, Carri, because, now we have this whole industry of all these gluten-free foods and you see them everywhere and people think, oh, well, this isn't so bad. I'll just go to the grocery store and buy the gluten-free this. But the problem is that one, it is more expensive. And two, many of these prepackaged gluten-free foods are not good for us. They are full of what we call refined carbohydrates, refined flours. A lot of the gluten-free foods are made with rice flour, white rice flour. That turns to sugar very quickly in your body. Most of these gluten-free packaged foods are empty calories, empty nutrients. They really are not doing anything good for your body. And many of them, are, of course, are laced with sugar because they want these gluten-free products to taste good. They want them to last on the shelf. And so we're seeing, you know, or I fear we're going to see a whole generation of pre-diabetic and diabetic people if you just turn to these gluten-free foods. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it is expensive. You can go into a gluten-free bakery and buy a gluten-free bread, and it's going to be $8. And, really what's in that bread? Is it simply refined flours? The other thing is many of the gluten-free foods are made with corn and soy, and these are GMO. These are genetically modified crops. And we do not want to be eating genetically modified foods. It's unfortunate in Canada they're not labeled. So that is quite serious too. You need to really start to read labels if you're going to be buying prepackaged gluten-free foods. There are some companies, I'm happy to say, that are starting to use more whole grains, quinoa and millet in their breads or their prepackaged foods. They're lowering the sugar content. They're maybe sweetening just with fruit. They're adding chia seed and hemp seed. And, those, at least if you're going to do a bit of prepackaged, look for those kind of ingredients. But, really, Carrie, what did we do 60, 70, 80 years ago? What did our parents and our grandparents eat? Let's get back to that. Whether it's a prepackaged regular food or a prepackaged gluten-free food, it's not good for us, really. There's a lot of sugar and salt and refined carbs in there. So why don't we get back to eating real food? Why don't we get back to healthy vegetables, raw nuts and seeds, healthy meats if you're a meat eater? There really is hundreds and hundreds of food items you can eat. You do not have to revolve your diet around gluten. It really is quite easy if you just take that mind shift and just shift it a little bit. You'd be surprised. And then people say to me, but I'm going to be cooking all the time. And no, not really. And that's something we talk about in the 21-day challenge. I give helpful hints about fast, easy, healthy recipes, or how you make things in a slow cooker and you cook extra so that you've got leftovers. We give ideas for lunches, because I know that's sort of probably the biggest. Everyone's like, well, I have a sandwich for lunch, so what am I going to have for lunch? So, whether it's a soup, whether you've made chicken the night before and you make yourself, a nice, maybe you go and you buy a pre-made salad, and you've got a few slices of chicken from your dinner last night that you now have this lovely chicken salad at lunchtime. Or, you have your eggs, or you have some hummus and some veggies. I mean, there's so many options to gluten.
Shirley, you said something that I made note of that I think really hits the nail on the head, and it's about the mind shift. So, from a personal standpoint, when I was in naturopathic school, I took a course by Dr. Tom O'Brien, who is the gluten guru. He's like the leading expert in the world on gluten. So I was sitting in his course, and he was naming off, all of these different health problems that have been researched, proven to be related to gluten. And I was like, okay, yeah, I've had that, and I have this, and they've never been able to fix that, and like all of this stuff he was naming off. At the end of the course, I knew I had to go off of gluten, but it just seemed like the hardest thing in the world. And so what I did, and what worked for me, was I just worked on breakfast, and I mastered breakfast, and that took a couple of weeks. And then I started working on lunch, and then I mastered lunch, and that took a couple of weeks. And then dinner was like the easiest, because a lot of dinner is actually naturally gluten-free. But once I got through that, it occurred to me that that actually wasn't that difficult. That was a lot harder in my head than it actually was. So it is about a mind shift. You're not climbing Mount Everest here, but if you had to climb Mount Everest, you would just take it one step at a time. And so for our listeners out there, a lot of the fear really is unfounded once you get through the diet. And some of you are probably rolling your eyes right now, but you'll see what we mean. So Shirley, can you talk next about dairy? Because gluten and dairy really go together.
They do, for sure. And So many people, when they take the 21-day challenge, they say, "Yeah, I probably have issues with gluten, but I don't have any issues with dairy. No, no, I've been drinking milk and eating cheese my whole life, and no, 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 no." And it's really interesting when we pull these foods, when we remove these foods out of the diet, and you give your body a chance, because so many people will say, "Oh, I've gone sort of gluten free," and they sort of eat it here and there, or they say, "Oh, well, I've gone like a few days without dairy." And it's just not the same. You have to do it 100% to see whether or not you are reacting. And the proteins in actually gluten, dairy, and soy are very similar. And so sometimes if you have issues with one, you have issues with the other. But 80% of the population is lactose intolerant, and that's the sugar in milk. And then we just have an issue. We just have a problem digesting that sugar in milk. And some of the people out there have a casein issue, and that's the protein in milk. And, you're really not going to figure this out until you pull the dairy out. And we have so many dairy-free options now. And it always amazes me every time I run my 21-day challenge in November. People come online because there's a closed Facebook group for support, and people will come online and they'll say, "Wow, that sort of stuffed nose that I've always had has disappeared, and those intermittent headaches have gone, and my bloated tummy isn't there anymore, and my skin issues have cleared up. Like, what's going on?" And it's really interesting that foods do play a role in our diet. And as you said, Carrie, you just take it step by step. And that's what the challenge is about, where I'm there to support you. And as you said, you tackle maybe breakfast first, because people say, "Oh my gosh, I have cereal and milk for breakfast. Now what?" And so we just tackle breakfast, and you figure out what are all the wonderful options for breakfast. And there are so many. And so once you get your head wrapped around that, all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, this isn't so bad. And guess what? I feel better," which is the added bonus, of course, right?
Absolutely. Now I have a question for you about ghee.
Mm.
Is ghee considered dairy or not?
Well, it's really interesting for people that need to, see if dairy plays a role. I always say to them during the challenge, take it out, take all of it out. And then a great way to see is if you make some ghee, some clarified butter. And really that's, you get your butter and you put it in a nice frying pan and you heat it up, and all the whey comes to the top, and you scoop that off. And you use that instead of butter, and you just see how you feel. Because really it is butter still, right? And so it's a great way to know, do you have, just an issue with lactose? Do you actually have a problem with the casein, with the protein in there? And or are you okay with clarified butter, with ghee? So that's a great way, because if you can have the clarified butter, what a great option for people to be able to make some up. And my girlfriend, what she does for her husband, because he did the 21-day challenge, and he felt much better, but he admitted he missed his butter, and so she started to make ghee. And what she did is she actually did half and half. She did half ghee and half coconut oil. And she put it in a jar, and he would use that to spread on whatever he was eating, his veggies or whatever. And it didn't have that pure coconut taste. It was a real mixture, and he was getting his healthy oils into him, because we now know we need healthy oils for our brain, for our cells. And so, yeah, so that would be a great idea for people to try that once they remove it, to see whether or not dairy really is affecting them.
I really like that idea with half coconut oil and half ghee,
Hmm.
because I find coconut oil by itself is just too coconutty for certain
For
recipes.
certain things, exactly, to put on your veggies or something. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what are 3 tips that you can give our listeners when it comes to dairy?
Do you mean going dairy free, removing dairy?
Yes.
Okay, so there are so many options, especially if you're a breakfast person and you think, well, I always have milk on my cereal. There are options like almond milk, there's rice milk, of course, there's coconut milk, there's even hemp milk and flaxseed milk. You can make your own if you want, or you can look for them in the grocery store. Please, though, when you're purchasing these, look for the unsweetened versions because, of course, we have um, almond milk now. There's chocolate almond milk with lots of sugar, and there's flavored rice milks, and there's flavored soy milk. So pay attention to that. There are so many alternatives even to cheese these days, and certainly one of my favorites is the Daiya, Daiya cheese, which is actually, it sounds weird, but it's made out of pea protein, but they have a mozzarella and a cheddar. And for me, it melts like cheese, it tastes like cheese. And so that's a little bit of an option if you really, really are missing that cheese and that you want to make, I don't know, some type of casserole that usually you put cheese on top. There are so many options. If you go to your healthy aisle in your grocery store, you'll see things, or your health food store as well. There are many, many options.
Okay, so let's switch gears now and start talking about sugar. Because
Mm.
for a lot of people, I think, well, sugar is the most addictive substance on the face of the planet. And and for a lot of people, it's physically difficult for them to get off of sugar because of its addictive properties. So talk to our listeners a little bit about sugar.
Oh, for sure. And you're so right. They say it is as addicting as cocaine and heroin. And so it's really difficult to pull it out of the diet sometimes. So in the challenge, or even in my gluten-free, sugar-free way, we talk about all the ways. And sugar is in everything. Really, you need to start label reading. It's in every prepackaged food. It is everywhere. And, once you start reading your labels and add up how much sugar you are eating, whether it's a fruit yogurt in the morning, a fruit juice, your orange juice, then you're eating a pasta, which, the refined carbs turn to sugar. You're eating some fruit. You maybe have a chocolate bar throughout the day. Maybe you're a Coke drinker. It's amazing how much sugar we are ingesting, and our bodies are just not designed for that much sugar. And I was once a sugarholic. I'll admit, I was a sugarholic, and it was really difficult to get off sugar. And for me, it caused candida, and I'm still working on my adrenals. My adrenals were so affected because I went the gluten-free route. I made a lot of my own gluten-free stuff, but you put in the sugar because it made it taste good. And of course, we're addicted to it. So it is a serious, serious thing. And I really, if I could suggest to people just to start to pay attention to how much sugar they are consuming in a day. It's estimated that we consume 200 pounds of sugar a year, and our teenagers even more than that. And statistics now say that 1 in 2 North Americans are pre-diabetic, but they don't even know it. And that by the year 2025, 1 in 3 will have diabetes. That is really a serious statistic. So yeah, certainly in the gluten-free, sugar-free whey course that I offer, we address sugar, and I give you ways of pulling sugar out. There are certain foods that we can eat that will help in that withdrawal process. And one of them, of course, is healthy fats. We get a lot of healthy fats, avocados, raw nuts in our diet, coconut oil, protein, healthy proteins. We don't have that same drop in our blood sugar. So many of us just eat a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of prepackaged foods, and we're getting that spike in our blood sugar and then that dip, which of course is then we're craving for the sugar. And so that in the afternoon, we reach for that chocolate bar or something sugary to keep us going until dinner. And so in the courses that I provide, we talk about, what are some of the snacks in the afternoon that we can have instead? Could we make little healthy nut balls, or make yourself a coconut smoothie with low glycemic fruit, and some hemp seed? They're delicious. Uh, Cut yourself an avocado and drizzle some olive oil and some sea salt over it. Things like that are really going to help. And there's even some supplements that can help with the withdrawals of sugar, because it can be difficult. I'm not, some people have no problem getting off sugar and other people really struggle. And so that's where, I'm there to help them, because it's really the best thing you can do for your body is to lower your sugar consumption.
Now, what about these different natural sugar alternatives like stevia or agave? Can you talk about some of those? Are those healthy?
Sure. And I think, overall, if we can get back to basics, if we can get back to when we're baking foods, use fruit to sweeten. If you're making banana muffins or banana date muffins, you don't need to add sugar. Bananas are sweet enough, dates are sweet enough. Or if you're making a carrot cake and it calls for 2 cups of sugar, why not just put in a quarter cup of raw honey? You're going to get those healthy properties in the honey or in the maple syrup, the added minerals. Um, they're still sugar though. They're still going to convert to sugar in your body. So that's why we need in the challenge and in the gluten-free, sugar-free way, we really want to look at how much sugar we are ingesting over the course of the day. Because as you said, there are lots of options. Stevia is a great option because it doesn't affect our blood sugar. But the one thing with stevia is, it is very, very sweet. The South Americans have been using stevia leaves to sweeten their tea forever, and certainly I like it, something like that in a tea. But when I bake with stevia, I personally don't like the flavor that it produces. I much prefer, now that my taste buds have changed, I like just baking with fruit or just enjoying a piece of fruit on its own, because when you remove the white chemical sugar from your diet, your taste buds will change. And for me, if I bite into something that contains white sugar or brown sugar, any of those refined sugars, to me it tastes chemical. So we talk about that in the courses. What are the options? Do you want to try something like a stevia? Do you want to have a little bit of raw honey, a little bit of maple syrup? Agave, we have to be a little bit careful with. Again, we of course want to stay away from the high fructose corn syrups. They are not good. They're made from GMO corn. Then there's the sugar alcohols, the xylitol. And again, sometimes they're an option for some people, but some of those sugar alcohols can affect people's tummies. They get digestive issues. So again, we talk about all the options in the courses that I provide. But really, when we do the 21-day challenge, Carrie, I'll be very honest, we are pulling out all the refined sugars. We really want to see what our body is like off these sugars, and give our bodies and our adrenals a rest from bombarding them with these, insulin highs, up dips, and that's really affecting our health.
So, as you were saying, during your 21-day challenge, you go to gluten zero, you go
Yeah.
to dairy sugar, you go to gluten zero and dairy zero, and also sugar zero.
Right. And they people can still have fruit, that's not a problem, but we're really pulling out, yeah, all the refined sugars. And it's amazing how great people feel. They do lose weight. And they just, I've had comments like, wow, my anxiety's gone. I'm not as depressed. I feel better. My irritable bowel is gone. My skin issues are gone. My headaches are gone. I mean, it's really uh, mind changing, body changing.
So, again, for our listeners out there, I know that this is a lot to take in, and for some of you, it's quite scary, and for some of you, it's quite nerve wracking. But just, to start looking at your diet and take it one meal at a time, and just switching from gluten to gluten free, and from dairy to dairy free, and from sugar to sugar free. Just do it one meal at a time and just take it step by step. And you will be amazed at the changes that happen in your body and to your health.
And that's why we do it over 21 days too, Carrie, and that's why week 1 we're removing gluten, and there's all these recipes, and we do, there's the closed Facebook group, and I do a phone consult with everybody to really gain that support. And as you say, you're not going to do it overnight. You're going to take the time to do it one day at a time, one meal at a time, to make it an easy transition. It's not about hardship. It's about all the foods you can eat, about all the delicious, healthy ways you can eat them. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I think we get in such a comfort zone and we tend to eat the same things day in and day out. And because of that, it gets really scary, and what the question always is, what am I going to eat? But to remind, everyone that there is still a whole bounty of all different kinds of foods out there to eat and that you've probably never even tried, and to kind of think of it as an adventure too.
Exactly. And the other thing too is a lot of parents will do this because they really want to change their diet, but their child's diet. And many kids, as we know, that are experiencing ADHD, hyperactivity, it's because of the foods that they're eating. It's the additives, the colorings, the sugar. And when mom and dad change what the kids are eating, they notice a huge difference in that their child can now concentrate, their child is not as hyperactive. So it's a real gift sometimes.
I love it, Shirley. So you offer this course, your 3-week challenge. Do you only offer it once a year?
I do. I'm probably going to change that, Carrie, because I get so many requests to twice a year. But right now it's every November.
Okay.
But what I've done is I've designed a smaller version of it that I call the gluten-free, sugar-free way. Because some people, in the beginning, they really just want to cut out the gluten. And so the gluten-free, sugar-free way is a way of doing that in a healthy way. So you're not just going to go and buy the prepackaged gluten-free. And that people can come to my website, Delicious Alternatives, and they can purchase that course. Again, it's a wonderful way. It's got all the recipes and the audios. It's also got interviews with doctors, specialists talking about the role that gluten and sugar plays in our diet. And so people can do that at any time of the year. And the 21 day, the more in-depth one where we, really work more one-on-one and in the closed Facebook group that I run every November. And as I said, hopefully next year I'll be running it twice a year.
Perfect. Shirley, are there any other ways that our listeners can find out more about you? Do you have a podcast, or what is your Facebook page?
Sure. So people can come to my website, deliciousalternatives.com. They can visit me on Facebook. Finally, Food I Can Eat is my Facebook page. I'm also on Twitter at Share Recipes. And be sure to get on my newsletter because I send out free recipes every month. I also have a YouTube channel as well where I do some cooking demos. Haven't got to the podcast yet, Carrie. We're getting there.
I know it's a lot. It starts to add up. I know that personally. It's a lot of time, but I really feel, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of my patients, that they just love learning, they're learning at their pace, and
Yeah, it's
so
a great way to be able, people can listen in their car on the way to work or when they're making dinner. I'm actually working on a Eat Real Food Health Summit, and that's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be like a really large podcast where I interview top medical specialists all about how to incorporate healthy, real food back into the diet. And it's coming in April, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be great. And it's a free online summit.
okay, so for our listeners, April, mark that on your calendars.
April 20th. Mark that on your calendars.
That's the day one of the online summit about learning about eating real food.
Yeah.
And then mark your calendars for November because that's the next time Shirley is offering her 3-week course on going gluten-free and dairy-free and sugar-free. Shirley, thank you so much for being my special guest today. This, again, has been another awesome interview with you.
Thanks so much, Carrie. It's been great.
All right, that wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Shirley Plant. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. And of course, I'd like to invite you back next week for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.